Hello, my dear audience, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Micro. As always, I am so happy that you are here with me. And if this is the first time that you are tuning in to Let's Talk Micro, well, thank you for choosing it as one of your podcasts. Okay, and for the benefit of everyone, if you listened to the last episode, you know that the last episode of season 4 was last week, so this is a throwback episode, but still some very important content. And it is about the Clinical Microbiology Procedures Handbook. And this is such an important source in clinical microbiology. It has so much information and it provides the guidelines that we use in the clinical microbiology laboratory. So, in the episode, I am joined by the editors in chief, Dr. Amy Leber and Dr. Carey Ann Burnham. So, this is such a great episode, so let's go ahead and listen to it. So, some of you, or maybe most of you that work in clinical microbiology, might be familiar with the Clinical Microbiology Procedures Handbook from the ASM, or American Society for Microbiology. And if you're not, then this is a great episode for you. I saw recently that the 5th edition came out, and I reached out to the editors in chief, and they agreed to come to the podcast. So I'm very happy about that. So with me today, they have been guests before on separate episodes. I have Dr. Amy Lieber and Dr. Carey Ann Burnham. Doctors, welcome to Let's Talk Micro.
Thank you so much.
Happy to be here.
Definitely my pleasure having you here. So, like I mentioned, you've been here before, but let's go ahead and start with an introduction for the audience.
Great. So my name is Amy Lieber, and I'm currently the Senior Director of Clinical Labs at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm also a professor of pediatrics and pathology at the Ohio State University. And I'm co-editor of CMPH.
And my name's Carey Ann Burnham. I'm Chief Clinical Officer for Pattern Bioscience, and I also serve as a professor in the Department of Pathology and Immunology at Washington University in St. Louis. And like Amy, I'm co-editor-in-chief of ClinMicro Procedures Handbook.
Welcome again. So let's go ahead and just start with the most basic questions. So, what is the Clinical Microbiology Procedures Handbook?
Sure, I'll take this one. So it started in 1992, was the first edition published by Henry Eisenberg. And his idea was to have a one-stop shop for procedural-based information that helps clinical labs to operate. So since 1992, we've had 4 editions, and we're now to the 5th edition. And it has, actually, this edition has 5 individual books covering 18 different sections and a wide variety of topics. I won't go through them all, but anything from procedure coding and reimbursement, specimen processing, aerobic and anaerobic bacteriology, mycology, parasite, agents of terrorism. So it's meant to cover a broad range of what we actually are doing in the clinical micro lab to serve as a resource for labs that maybe don't have a PhD level director or aren't don't have a pathologist that's particularly knowledgeable about micro. It gives them some place to go to get up-to-date information for how to do what they are trying to do in the lab for patient care.
Yes, and definitely a great resource. Like like you mentioned, I've been in situations like that where a lab where there's like no PhD, and so it's a great resource to have. And now, especially with the podcast, like I've been definitely using it a lot, and I have that, and I use it when I'm researching a topic, along with the manual of clinical microbiology. So there's some very amazing resources. So how is this information obtained?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as Amy mentioned, there's been several editions. So for something that's been in the book before, definitely the legacy chapter would be used as a starting point. But the information to populate the chapters comes from a lot of different resources. Of course, looking to the literature, especially looking to see what's new in the literature, what's known about best practice, or what's known about a particular organism or the way an assay functions. Looking at things like guidance documents, so things from CLSI or FDA or ISO standards. And then, as it turns out, as many of us are well aware, some of what we do in the micro lab might not be well documented in the literature. It might come from a wealth of experience, something you've done hundreds of times. And so we do try to have authors who have a lot of expertise in each area leading those chapters. So all of that comes together, and the chapter author would go ahead and write it into the SOP in the prescribed format, and then it would be reviewed by the section editor. So literature, guidance documents, lab director experience. Amy, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, but I just think it's so true that a lot of this has a lot of historical background that's not in the literature, but we want to have at least one place where it's written down so that we can have some kind of reference for these procedures so they're all done the same. That's really key, is that if we all perform things similarly, we can get similar results no matter what lab we're in.
I think that's a great point. And sometimes different regulatory bodies see things differently. For example, in susceptibility, CLSI sometimes has different guidelines than UCAST, for example. And so to make this a global book, but also to help people understand that you have to use the guideline you're following for good interpretation, we'll try to have charts where we point out the differences between the different agencies as well, just to really bring visibility to that for laboratory staff.
Okay, and the next question is also that it is helpful for everyone, but I think also for people that are just coming in brand new, medical lab scientists, you're starting to work in micro, so you see all this information, on how to work your cultures or what to do, your guidance. So how does the information that's in the book, relate to the work that we do in clinical micro in the lab?
Oh, I'm probably a little biased, but I think it directly relates to the work that we all do in the lab. So the SOP part, the analytical part, is often a step-by-step guide that's meant to really guide us in our work. But of course, we do our best work when we understand the why behind the work. So it starts with a preamble to help point out what are important considerations, what does the literature tell us about that topic or SOP, pre-analytical considerations, because we know our testing is only as good as what we start with, and then post-analytical. So, for example, what report comments might we append to make our work more interpretable to the end user? And so really each part of the book is meant to span that continuum of laboratory testing, help the end user understand all of those whys and create the best product.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in that literally we'll go to it. For example, the other day, we don't routinely do satelliting testings, and we look to CMPH to learn how to do that procedure. So it's something we don't do very regularly, but now we have a resource to say step by step, how do we do this to ID like a particularly interesting organism? So it's very practical, I think. And we hope to design it so it is usable on the bench at the bench level.
Something that's just sort of funny to add on about that is for some of the chapters, it's actually kind of tricky to pick which section of the book it should be in. Certain topics, do they belong in molecular or do they belong in aerobic bacteriology, like group A strep, for example? Or even deciding, like one of our new sections for blood culture, should it be separate or should it be incorporated into other sections? A lot of the vision is thinking about how labs are typically separated into benches or organized, and to try to have the book fit to that. But our labs are all evolving so quickly, that's not always as straightforward as it seems.
Yeah, I like how you said about as to the why, and definitely, me as a medical lab scientist, that I'm there every day, and I always want to understand, yeah, the why, and knowing your resources, and it definitely helps you. It makes you better at your job when you have a better understanding. So that's something that using this medium, I try to impart, and hopefully, medical lab scientists or other or microbiologists are listening, they definitely they can take on this, and because definitely it's very helpful, and for the audience out there, it's definitely a lot of great information, from like gram stain procedure to like how to process a tissue, how to prepare the slide depending on the type of sample that you have, even how to process, work with samples, like a potential bioterror agents, like your anthrax and your senior pestis and stuff like that. So it's definitely a great resource that everyone in microbiology should be familiar with. Okay, so editor-in-chief. So what does an editor-in-chief do? Is this position like a permanent thing, or does it change with every edition? How does it work?
Well, it doesn't change with every edition, and actually, there have only been now 4 editors-in-chief: Henry Eisenberg, Lynn Garcia, myself, and now Carey Ann. So it kind of turns over with the lifespan of the book, and then also who's like active professionally. And certainly our role is to kind of shape the content on a global level to decide what needs to stay in the book, those tried and true things like gram stain, culture-based methods, and what needs to be added in new based on newer technologies. We also identify the section editors. So there are 18 sections. Carey Ann and I couldn't directly edit that or write it. So there are a lot of people that are involved. So we pick section editors based on their expertise, and then they go out and search out authors to author each of these separate chapters or SOPs. So it's quite a long and involved process to bring something from the beginning to print. And the section editor really is the kind of coach of all of it, keeping things on process, on time, making sure the content is good, and reviewing it for final approval. So it's a lot of steps. And really, I couldn't have been more blessed to have Carey Ann come on board, because this document is so big and there's so much content. It's really very hard for one person to really oversee all of it. So I was so happy to have Carey Ann come on board.
Well, and I was so lucky to have Amy as a mentor who had been through it before, so I could really learn from her about the process. It is a gargantuan book, and so understanding the process is very useful. I'm also just super grateful to our section editors. I know Amy alluded to it, but just really to give them a shout out. They were creative, they were the experts, they knew the right people to work on all of the chapters, and it just was a really fun group who was very devoted to making the product the best it could be and doing the updates and getting all the pictures. So very happy with it. We did in the end review all of the proofs for all of the chapters. So for a 5-volume book, that's no joke.
Yeah.
I also want to give a shout out to someone specifically, Ellen Fox from ASM Press. So she was the managing editor from the publication side. And let's just say Ellen kept us all in order, kept the trains running, held all of us to a very high degree of excellence and high standards. And I'm just not quite sure how we could have gotten through it without Ellen as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so as we mentioned, so this is the 5th edition. So what's new in this edition?
Well, I will say every single section in this book was reviewed and updated from the 4th edition. So it should all be relatively current. And I will say this happened during COVID, so it was quite a challenging process, harkening back to Ellen, who helped us through this. It was a challenging time for all of us to be writing and editing, but we soldiered through. And there is a lot of new material in here. Particularly, I'd like to highlight that we really made an effort to get more images in. These are color images, and they really add to the learning, particularly as you're learning on the bench. The colors of biochemicals or the look of something is very important. The sections that I was involved with, the molecular section obviously was updated. That's a very fast moving area. And actually SARS-CoV-2 was really got onto the, we'll talk about this in a minute, the website. It was made available very quickly. Also, the virology section was updated. A lot of that had to do with COVID. People wanted to be able to isolate virus in a research setting and possibly in a clinical setting. And there's no other resource that really had virology. So we updated that. And then finally, the serology section was really greatly expanded. Not only did we add COVID serologies, but fungal serologies, things that we do day in and day out. And I think it really has improved that section in a number. And I know Carey Ann has some particular highlights she's proud of.
There were a couple of brand new sections for the book, and they were content that existed in the book in a kind of a more compact way before there were new sections. But one of the new sections is about blood cultures, really recognizing blood cultures are a very high volume specimen in the lab. And now there's so many things that are done with positive blood cultures, molecular tests, rapid phenotypic tests, and to really try to highlight the workflow across that. And there's a lovely new chapter in that as well, really related to validation as well. And then the MALDI-TOF section has been pulled out and expanded into its own section. And MALDI-TOF has become the mainstay of identification in most of our laboratories. So I think that's worthy of its own section as well. Amy pointed out a lot of the other great highlights. I think one of the things that's sort of fun about the virology is a lot of the new content was actually content that had been retired, so to speak, that had to get pulled out from the archives, which I think makes the point that even some of the procedures in the book that maybe if they seem like we don't do them as much anymore, it's great to have this one-stop shop where it's all there. So if you do need to dust off something that's more historical, you have a great reference and exact step-by-step how to.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes, you never know if you're gonna need something like that, and it's so convenient having it in one place. It's definitely very helpful. We all been there when we're trying to, look for something, and we're searching, and it's difficult and time consuming.
And you never know what new pathogen will emerge. So
Yes, definitely. So, with let's go ahead and talk about the cover art. And I saw that also, the book it changed. Like I had the fourth edition, so there was the binders, which it has pros and cons. I mean, if you needed a specific session, you take it out, and it was great to take it to another place. I like the books. I saw them. My boss on my hospital, they already have them, and they look very nice. So, what can you tell me about the cover art, and what is the idea behind it, and what does it represent?
It's a great question. I have a copy of it here for those who are looking. So I really love what the cover art represents. When we were trying to come up with the concept, there were some things we talked about. One is that we really wanted to convey that this was meant to be a book that could be used globally and have procedures that would relate really to all parts of the world. Also, that microbiology is global. And I think the pandemic has shown us that pathogens move quickly and they can bring us together. And then we also wanted to really convey that people are the engine that makes ClinMicro work. So we wanted some element of people in the picture as well. So that's where the hand holding the dish that looks global, sort of what the epicenters came from. Amy, anything about it? Any part of the concept I missed you wanted to add?
no, I just think that really we often think it's US centric, but it is used in other countries. So we wanted to communicate that, and we've tried to be conscious of that with the content too, I think.
I think in terms of the binder versus the textbook, as you said, there's pros and cons to both. I think the new books look really beautiful. I noticed some of our users, as you mentioned, pulling it out of the binder and not having that maybe will be an adjustment.
And we would like to hear the feedback if it does impact how you're using the book. So we can't change it overnight, but we'll keep that in mind for the next print edition. Again, it was a change that was made rather last minute. So we have mixed feelings. I have mixed feelings about it. It does look wonderful. It fits very nicely on your bookshelf, doesn't kind of fall over, but we'll see how it impacts its use.
Yeah, I mean, personally, with the binder, I normally I work from one place with it when I'm looking at it, and maybe on some few times I needed to pull some things out, take if I'm going to the library or something when I'm teaching or stuff like that. But overall, yeah, I kind of that's what I heard, like at my hospital that the whole taking. But the books, they look really nice, and they're not really big either, so they're just it's like a nice size.
And we tried to divide it into meaningful related sections, and each book has on its spine a little bit about the content, so it helps you pick what section you need.
Okay, and so right, so we kind of barely touch on it, but what about is there an online resource for accessing this content?
There is. It's a concept called ClinMicro Now from ASM Press. I will say it's If you buy the print edition of the book, you don't get the online version. You can buy a subscription either at an individual or an institutional level for Clin Micro now. And in that, you get CMPH, the Manual of Clinical Micro, and then the case studies book. So it's very useful. It has an index where you type in the word and it'll bring up numerous things. It has a very searchable interface, but it is a separate subscription. But I think it's well worth it for a laboratory to invest in that.
And the idea is that we'll be reviewing the content annually, and chapters that have content that changes a lot or needs revisions, it will be updated. And so, with a textbook, it's usually several years between editions. That's the life cycle of a textbook. But on ClinMicro now, we'll have the opportunity to do more frequent refreshes. And the landing page of that will also help guide people to what some of the new updates are. I really love the online resource. Personally, I use it almost every day.
You do? Okay. Yeah, I was, yeah, definitely. I don't use the online much, but definitely, there's a lot of people out there that will definitely enjoy it and the convenience of it. Like I've talked to about other resources, like the CLSI and having it online there rather than having to get up and go check your binder like a lot of people. So it's definitely very, accessible and convenient. So definitely, and then some sort of subscription. So if you don't, you just pay right like a monthly or yearly, and then you don't have to purchase the actual book, but you have the access to it. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, just that, again, there are so many people that contributed to this book. We can't even mention them all. Literally hundreds of people that put their time and effort into it. And I really am very proud of what we've put together. And I hope it is a useful resource for bench technologists. I think they have a very hard job in this day and age. And any kind of tools we can give them to help make their job better and to do better patient care, I think, is a good thing.
100%. And we would love to hear from all of you. If you have a suggestion for a chapter we should include in a future edition, or if you think we missed the mark on something, we would love to know. We want to make this as useful as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. There's a lot of information. Sometimes the SOPs are not clear, or we just want to understand, why are we not reporting this organism? So a lot of questions that they arise on the bench, and sometimes, you hear different information out there. So it's a great place to go, look at the source and see, okay, this is what they're saying, this is, the guidance that they're offering on this. So, and then, one thing that you mentioned, Dr. Leber, about this being used as a global resource, that was one thing that as I was doing this podcast and connecting with people from other countries, yeah, I definitely see that, they reference to the ASM books and they post things about, the guidance and things like that.
Yeah. We forget that not every lab has the access to MALDI and are still doing conventional testing with biochemicals. So you're absolutely correct. It's a wide range of laboratory types this can serve, and we always need to remember that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Not everyone has access to MALDI, and it's interesting when the MALDI goes down and everyone has to revert back to the old thinking.
Yes.
It's just it makes for interesting days in the lab. Well, Dr. Lieber and Dr. Burnham, definitely it's been great having you here again. This was very informative, and I hope the audience enjoys it. So thank you for taking the time to come into Let's Talk Micro.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us. It was so fun to have this conversation with you both.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
My pleasure. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as I said before, it is such great content. As always, you can find Let's Talk Micro on any podcast platform. So please subscribe to the podcast, download episodes, and if the app allows you to do so, please go ahead and leave a review. Thank you so much for the support. As far as socials, you can find Let's Talk Micro on Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky Social, and TikTok as Let's Talk Micro, on X as Let's Talk Micro 1, on LinkedIn as Luis Plaza, and I have an email address which is letstalkmicro@outlook.com. And something very important that I shared through social media, which is that now the Let's Talk Micro podcast has a website. So all you have to do is type letstalkmicro.com and you can find our website. And in there you can find episode updates. I compile a list of some popular episodes. You can listen to episodes. You can subscribe so you can get some updates. There are some study resources, so please, I invite you to go ahead and check it out. Okay, so as you know, the Let's Talk Micro podcast does not have any sponsors, so if you want to support the podcast in any way, you can do so via a Venmo link or via Buy Me a Coffee, KOFI, both links available on the show notes. And if you're looking to learn more about antibiotics, please check out www.learnantibiotics.com and the Learn Antibiotics book available on Amazon. These resources include cheat sheets, practice tests, games, and more, and they are being used by thousands of people worldwide and may be helpful for you or your colleagues. Great resources from Dr. Timothy Gauthier, a very passionate pharmacist. And the Let's Talk Micro podcast is supported by the American Society for Microbiology. To learn more about microbes, visit asm.org. And that, my dear audience, it's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed this TBT, Clinical Microbiology Procedures Handbook. As always, I enjoy sharing this information with you. Great content, this 5th edition. So please, continue bringing that passion to what you do. It's so important. You do such great work. And hey, season 5 will return soon with some new content. In the meantime, go back to some older episodes or recommend it to someone. And of course, please check out the website, letstalkmicro.com. So, as always, stay motivated, stay safe, and of course, continue talking micro. Until the next time. Bye.